Okay, so now that we have the keel on here, we're going to be putting a little bit of fiberglass going up the sides here. Remember, I've told you, and I'm going to tell you again, fiberglass doesn't like tight corners, right? So what I have here is a syringe, 60cc syringe full of thickened epoxy. Now it's thickened to pretty much the consistency of a pudding kind of thing. We don't want it to run, but we don't want it so thick that we can't spread it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this now and I'm going to run it right along the joint. Oop, I gotta get my plunger started here. I'm going to run it right along the joint all the way down the boat. Trying to keep it as neat as I can. And this holds about 1.5 ounces of epoxy, which isn't going to be quite enough to finish this. It'll bring me most of the way. All right. So after I've done that, I take my spoon and I come back up and I spread it right in the crevice. Trying to get out as much of that extra as I can as I go along here. And doing as much cleaning as I can as I go along. So you're just going to keep spreading all the way down until you fill that crevice. So up here I can see that I got a couple of weak spots where there was air in the syringe, so just go back and fill it in like so. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is go back and get some more epoxy so I can finish this run. I got a little bit more epoxy here. So now really, you can do this by hand just by using a putty knife or whatever, pushing it in there, but I don't suggest it. You know, I told you I don't like showing specialized tools because not everybody has them, but you know, right now you can get these from us, so they're easily accessible to you and they will help you do a nice neat job. Alright, so I'm going to stop right there, leave a little bit in reserve in case I need to do any patching. And then continue to run on down the boat. Well, that's pretty much all there is to this fillet stuff. Just, you know, keep smoothing it out and go back and forth as much as you need to until it starts to harden up. Because you don't want it running on you, so don't just put it on there and run out of the shop for the night, because you might be really surprised what it looks like tomorrow. So just keep on going back and forth over it. And again, cannot stress enough, the more you clean up now, the less you gotta sand later. So take every tool you got. Get all that extra out of there, because this stuff is hard as a rock. And again, if you're painting your boat, you can do this. You know, I would recommend using the wood fiber for a base coat, but if you wanted to really smooth that out, you could put micro balloons over the top or glass beads, because it's much easier to sand. Sands out much smoother. But this will be fine. I mean, you know, not too many people are going to be flipping your boat over looking at the connection on your keel. So, and if they are, tell them to mind their own business. So I don't think this is going to be a real problem here for you. And as you can see, you know, this took me about 15 minutes and a little bit of patience on a hot summer's night, and we've got a really nice fillet here. So I'm going to stop fussing with this now and let it dry. And I already did the other side, did that yesterday, and it's already dried and sanded, so we're going to roll the boat around and show you how to put fiberglass up there. All right, well, this next step should be familiar to you, though we haven't done anything exactly like taping a seam. So there's like most things, a slightly different technique there. This is nothing but clear epoxy. And what I need to do is first get some down on the boat. Now, this side is, it's all been sanded down. So I have a nice smooth fillet all the way down there. And we're going to put cloth going from here to here, connecting the two. So the best way to do that is to take a chip brush and go ahead and paint some clear epoxy on here. Now, if your boat has set up a little bit down here, like it's been more than 3 or 4 days, then you're going to want to scuff that up with a little bit with sandpaper. Now, I only plan on coming down about 3 inches. So I took some scraps from when we did the outside of the boat. I saved them and I cut tape, basically, fiberglass tape. And I cut them to about 4 inches wide. So I'll come down the boat about 3, and I'll go up the side there, and it'll overhang about 1/2 inch or so. You don't want it to overhang much, as little as possible actually, because the weight of the cloth will tend to try to keep it away from the boat, and you don't want that to happen. If it's a warm day there, like it is here, you're going to have to move pretty quick with this, because you got a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to do it. You're going to see on the cart behind me that I have an old piece of 3/4 inch plywood, basically salvage wood. Reason for that is, instead of putting the cloth on the boat and then putting epoxy on it, we're actually going to saturate the cloth before we put it on the boat. The reason for that is we're going up around the curve, so it's not going to be an easy thing to do. Now, my dead wood here, I've filled any little cracks that there might be in there and sanded everything smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of 10-ounce cloth right here as well. That's going to stiffen everything up real nice. All right. Okay, so I got epoxy on the boat. Now it's time to get some on the cloth. Now your stopping point is going to be, just after where all these pieces come together here. So that gets nice and tight there. Good and rigid. Okay. All right, so now take the cloth here. I'm just gonna do a little quick pour right down the middle and spread it out. Again, the idea here is to get the cloth saturated before you put it on the boat. That way there you don't have to worry about it. And then you're going to use your gloved hands, push it all down in there. And if you have to, you'll take that paintbrush and go back over it again. So basically you want to push the epoxy on this till the cloth disappears into the board underneath. And then we're going to very gently pick it up and move it. Try to be careful not to fray the edges, because that'll just make more work for you when you're putting it on. And so the more careful you are here, the less work you'll have to do later. Take as much time as necessary to get it all filled in. All right. So I hold in my hand a fully saturated piece of 4-inch cloth. And so now I'm going to pick it up, transfer it to the boat. Again, going a couple inches to after where all those wooden pieces meet. Just get it up there kind of where it needs to belong. And then come back with your gloves and move everything into place. And it should go nice and smooth, and you just take your fingers and run it right along that fillet there. And if you did a good job creating and sanding your fillet, it should go in there nice and tight, no problems. Okay. And that is that. So I got about 3 more pieces to put in before I hit the deadwood down there, which is a little bit different, but the same thing. All right, so let me just go ahead and put these pieces in. All right, well, the only difference with the deadwood is I have a piece here which I have cut roughly to shape, but it's the same process. You're going to make sure it's good and full of resin. I'm moving it back and forth just as if it was on the boat, and we're going to pick it up and put it on the deadwood. Now the overlaps, you can see that if put those 3 pieces on. The overlaps in general should be at least a couple of inches from one to the other. If it's a little bit more, it's no big deal. You can, that last piece before I hit the deadwood, you can see that it was a little bit long, and rather than mess with it and cut with it, all I did was pull it down the boat a little bit, so I got an overlap there. It's probably about 6 inches. Again, just not a big deal. Just so we're clear here, the purpose of what we're doing is to make sure that we have plenty of strength and binding between the keel and the boat. Because if you don't do this, sooner or later, the keel is going to delaminate. It's going to hit a rock or whatever. And what this does is it gives you a lot of abrasion resistance. Okay. So I'm going to come through here with my knife and trim all these, but first I'm going to take my paintbrush again. Make sure to make it all the way back. I'm going to take my paintbrush again with a little bit of extra resin, and I'm going to run down and make sure that I didn't starve the cloth anywhere. So again, I'm just going to take the paintbrush, a little bit of that leftover epoxy, make sure it's in there nice and tight. Anything that you leave as an air bubble is going to have to be cut out, and now's the time to get it done. Okay, well, we're one step closer to done. That was a pretty simple operation, but it's a pretty important operation. If while you're cutting the trim you find that you're creating more problems than you're solving, then don't. Once it dries, you'll just have to sand it down a little bit before the filler coat, that's all. The whole idea behind cutting is to get as clean a line as you can, but if you use your scissors, you cut it and you don't fray as you're putting it on, then you'll probably be okay anyway. Okay, do not try to do both sides at the same time, because if I tried to do this side now, I'd be going up and this cloth would be hitting that cloth and it would be pulling away, and it would just be a battle going back and forth, and it's just not worth it. So do one side, let it set overnight, and then come back and do the other side. The thing, you know, I know I've said this a few times, and I'm going to say it intentionally. Epoxy has 2 different kinds of bonding. It bonds mechanically and it bonds chemically. Once the epoxy that it's connected to is fully cured, then your opportunities for a chemical bond are gone, right? At that point, it's just a mechanical bond, which is very, very strong. But what you need to do is, if this has been 4 or 5 days in the hot weather, then it's cured. So what you need to do is take a little bit of sandpaper and scuff it up, and that'll give you a better mechanical bond as you go from one to the other. And that's why on this side here, it had been 3 days and it's been 90 degrees here. So I took a little bit of sandpaper and I scuffed it all up. And then I put that down, that'll give me a good mechanical bond there, okay? And before we do the final filler coat on the outside, we'll scuff the whole thing down. Now, when I say scuff, I just mean, take some 120 grit paper and lightly sand over the boat. Again, you do not want to sand this stuff when it's not cured. 2 reasons. One, you might turn it into mush again because it's heat activated, and if you apply a lot of heat to it like friction, it might start to unset on you. But more importantly, it's a dangerous substance to be inhaling, and particularly while it's still uncured, okay? So make sure that it's cured, and then when you are sanding it, once it is cured, make sure that you're wearing proper mask and you've got good ventilation and all that. And you should be fine. Okay, I'm gonna walk away from this boat now because I'll mess with it if I don't, and I don't wanna mess with it anymore. And then I'm gonna come back tomorrow and I'm gonna do this side. I'm going to trim these down, just like we did before. Take the razor knife, go down, take the rasp tool there and scrape it up. And then I'm not going to bother sanding this top again yet because I'm not ready to do that. I'll apply fiberglass to this side, trim it, and then once we're done, I will take a small strip of fiberglass and put it all the way down this, right? So I'll sand it, get rid of all the gunk up there, put fiberglass. Now that's not for strength, but it's for scuffs, right? This stuff is really good at if you're pulling your rocks up, pulling your boat up on a rocky shore or gravelly shore, that'll give it that little bit of extra protection on there. Okay, time to put it to bed.